I watched in horror as the HOA president demolished Mom's wheelchair ramp while she cried helplessly at her window. This entitled woman had no idea who I was, or that I wore a sheriff's badge under my jacket. Her face when I revealed myself? Priceless. Boyer watching full video. Comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. It was a Friday afternoon when everything happened. I had just finished my shift at the county sheriff's office and was looking forward to a quiet weekend. The last few weeks had been particularly busy with a series of break-ins on the east side of town, and I was exhausted. My plan was simple: go home, order some pizza, and maybe watch a movie before crashing early. Then my phone rang. I recognized my mother's ringtone immediately, a cheerful tune I'd set up for her. Usually her calls brought a smile to my face, but something felt different this time. When I answered, I could hear her crying. "Mom? What's wrong?" I asked, instantly alert, my tiredness forgotten. "They're here," she sobbed. "They're tearing down my ramp, honey." That horrible woman from the HOA brought workers with her. My blood ran cold. My mother had suffered a severe stroke last year that left her partially paralyzed on her right side. She could still speak clearly and her mind was as sharp as ever, but she needed a wheelchair to get around. The ramp I had built at the front of her house was her only way to independently enter or leave her home. "I'm coming right now," I told her firmly. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll handle this." I jumped into my personal vehicle and sped toward her neighborhood, which was only about 15 minutes from the station. Mom had moved into Pinecrest Estates 5 years ago, after Dad passed away. It was a nice, quiet community with well-maintained lawns and friendly neighbors. At least most of them were friendly. The Homeowners Association at Pinecrest had recently elected a new president, Karen Mitchell. I'd only met her once, briefly, but Mom had mentioned her several times in our conversations. According to Mom, Mrs. Mitchell was obsessed with maintaining the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood and had been issuing violation notices for everything from improper mailbox colors to flower arrangements she deemed unsuitable. As I pulled into my mother's driveway, my jaw clenched at the scene before me. 2 men in work clothes were actively dismantling the wooden wheelchair ramp I had carefully constructed 3 months ago. I had spent 2 full weekends building it, making sure it was solid, safe, and compliant with all county regulations. I'd even painted it to match the color of Mom's house. Standing on the lawn, directing the workers, was a blonde woman in an expensive-looking pantsuit. She was pointing and gesturing with manicured hands, completely oblivious to my arrival or to my mother's face pressed against the window, watching helplessly as her connection to the outside world was being destroyed. I stepped out of my car and approached calmly, though inside I was seething. I was wearing civilian clothes, jeans, and a light jacket that covered my uniform shirt. I had been heading home when Mom called, so I hadn't changed out of my work clothes completely. "Excuse me," I said in a controlled voice, the same tone I used when approaching tense situations on the job. "I'm Sheriff Williams. May I ask what's happening here?" The blonde woman barely glanced at me, just a dismissive flick of her eyes before returning her attention to the workers. "We're removing this unauthorized structure. It violates HOA regulations. I'm sorry, but this ramp was built for my mother who is disabled. She needs it to leave her house." Now the woman turned to face me, her expression a mixture of impatience and condescension. "I'm Karen Mitchell, president of the Pinecrest Estates Homeowners Association. And while I sympathize with your mother's situation, rules are rules. This ramp was installed without proper approval from the architectural committee, and frankly, it's an eyesore." "Mrs. Mitchell," I said, working hard to keep my voice level, "I never received any notices about violations or required approvals." She sighed dramatically and reached into a leather portfolio she was carrying. "I've sent 3 notices over the past month." She pulled out copies of letters addressed to my mother's house. The first was a request for information, the second was a warning, and the third was a notice of action. All clearly stated that unapproved structures must either receive retroactive approval or be removed. I glanced at the papers. They had indeed been sent, but they were addressed simply to homeowner, and made no mention of accommodations for disabilities. "Ma'am, I understand you have procedures, but this ramp is necessary for my mother's mobility. She's disabled following a stroke last year." Karen Mitchell rolled her eyes. "Well, there are proper channels for these things. You can't just build whatever you want because it's convenient. The committee meets on the first Tuesday of each month. You're welcome to submit an application with proper blueprints and material specifications for consideration at the next meeting." One of the workers had paused to listen to our conversation, looking increasingly uncomfortable. The other continued removing boards, now halfway through dismantling the ramp. I took a deep breath and removed my jacket, revealing my full sheriff's uniform and badge. Karen Mitchell's face drained of color as she finally realized who she was speaking to. "Mrs. Mitchell," I said, my voice now carrying the full authority of my position. "This ramp was built in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act and county accessibility laws. Removing it constitutes illegal discrimination against a disabled person and potential false imprisonment, as you are effectively trapping my mother inside her home." The workers immediately stopped what they were doing. The one who had been listening placed his tools on the ground and stepped back. I didn't realize," Karen stammered. "The HOA rules clearly state. Federal and state laws supersede HOA regulations," I interrupted firmly. "And I can assure you that the county takes accessibility rights very seriously." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. "Hello, Jeff? This is Sheriff Williams. I need you to come over to 327 Pinecrest Lane right away. We have a situation involving ADA violations and potential elder abuse." Jeff was our county attorney and also a good friend. Karen Mitchell's face had now shifted from pale shock to flushed embarrassment. "Now wait just a minute," she protested. "This is a civil matter between the homeowner and the HOA. You can't involve the county in this." I looked her directly in the eyes. "When you deliberately remove accessibility accommodations for a disabled person, it becomes more than a civil matter. It becomes a potential criminal one." The workers were now gathering their tools, clearly wanting no part in what was happening. "You too," I called out to them. "I'll need your names and the name of your company. You'll be potential witnesses." They quickly provided the information, explaining they were just doing what they were hired to do and had no idea about the situation. "You can go," I told them. "But don't cash any check you receive for this job until this matter is resolved." As they hurried to their truck, I saw my mother's front door slowly open. Using her walker, she carefully made her way to what remained of the ramp, then stopped at the edge where it had been partially dismantled, effectively stranding her. "Mom, stay there. I'll help you in a minute," I called out, then turned back to Karen. "Mrs. Mitchell, here's what's going to happen now. You and the HOA will pay for the immediate restoration of my mother's ramp, not in a month after some committee meeting, but starting tomorrow. You will also issue a written apology to my mother for this incident. And going forward, you will ensure that all HOA actions consider accommodations for residents with disabilities." Karen had regained some of her composure and tried to stand her ground. "You can't dictate terms to the HOA. We have bylaws and procedures. And I have the county attorney on his way, along with a deputy who will take statements," I replied calmly. "I'm sure the local news would also be interested in how Pinecrest Estates treats its disabled residents." That final comment seemed to penetrate her armor. The mention of public exposure clearly concerned her more than legal threats. "Fine," she said stiffly. "I'll call an emergency meeting of the board tonight. We'll arrange for repairs." "Good," I nodded. "And one more thing, all future communications regarding my mother's property come to me directly. Here's my card." I handed her my official business card, watching as she reluctantly took it. Jeff arrived about 15 minutes later, by which time I had helped my mother back inside and documented the damage to the ramp with photos. Karen Mitchell was still there, now sitting in her luxury SUV making phone calls. Jeff listened to my explanation, examined the HOA notices and frowned deeply. "Classic case of HOA overreach," he said. "They forget that while they can regulate aesthetic choices, they can't violate federal protections. We'll make sure this gets fixed right away." True to his word, Jeff had a contractor at my mother's house the very next morning, a Saturday. The county had emergency protocols for accessibility issues, and this qualified. By Sunday evening my mother had a new ramp, better than the one I had built, with proper handrails and a gentler slope. The following week, Karen Mitchell delivered a hand-signed letter of apology to my mother, along with a fruit basket. The HOA also revised their regulations to include specific provisions for accessibility accommodations, with a streamlined approval process. Word spread quickly through Pinecrest Estates about what had happened. Several neighbors stopped by to check on my mother and express their support. A few even shared their own stories of run-ins with Karen and the HOA over various trivial matters. 3 months later, at the annual HOA meeting, Karen Mitchell was voted out as president. The new leadership adopted a more compassionate approach to community management, focusing on building relationships rather than enforcing arbitrary rules. As for my mother, she regained her independence and confidence. The incident brought us closer to the community, as neighbors now regularly check in on her and offer help when needed. Sometimes, when I visit Mom for Sunday dinner, we sit on her front porch and marvel at how something so negative turned into such a positive change for the entire neighborhood. She always smiles and says, "Sometimes people just need to be reminded that rules exist to help people, not hurt them." And I couldn't agree more. In my years as county sheriff, I've learned that true justice isn't just about enforcing laws, it's about protecting the dignity and rights of every person, especially those who need it most. Sometimes that means standing up to people who hide behind rulebooks and regulations while forgetting the human beings those rules were meant to serve. What happened that Friday afternoon became a turning point not just for my mother, but for the entire Pinecrest community. A reminder that behind every policy, regulation, and bylaw, there are real people with real needs. And sometimes, justice arrives wearing a badge and carrying a toolbox, ready to rebuild what should never have been torn down in the first place.